Welcome to CSPC 2021. I'm Naomi Shuman, and I'm co-chair of the program committee. For this interview, I have with me Associate Dean and Director for the School of Policy Studies and Professor with a Canadian Research Chair in Renewable Energy Development and Implementation, Dr. Mabee. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Warren, you currently hold a number of distinct roles at Queen's University. Can you tell me what these positions entail?
Sure. So you touched on a little bit of this in the intro. I am a Canada Research Chair and a professor in the Department of Geography and Planning. And all of my research really is based out of that department. My students are based there. I do work on different renewable energy technologies and on the policies that support them. So I really work at this interface between policy and technology. I'm very keen to learn, what policies or what regulations or what mechanisms can work to support new technologies and adapted technologies. I'm also very interested in how those technologies are evolving because, as you know, every year something new comes out, something that could change the way that we look at the energy system. So that's really where my research group sits. I'm also currently the director of the School of Policy Studies here at Queen's, and that's due to my background in policy. It's a terrific role because I get to interact with people that are working across the full spectrum of policy issues. So think of health or defense, think of issues around cultural or social policy. We're deep into a reckoning, I think, around Indigenous policy and governance policy here in Canada. And being the director of the School of Policy Studies gives me a really interesting and privileged window to see all of these things that are going on, which in turn informs my own research. So it's a wonderful sort of a role. I enjoy it every day, and I think it's really helped me to make a difference.
Okay, great. I'm going to then dig into some more energy-specific policy questions. So Canada has set ambitious greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. What type of disruptive renewable energy applications do you see helping Canada to achieve these goals?
So it's a really important question, and we as a country are really just starting to grapple with it. Energy doesn't always make the front page of the papers. It doesn't always make the top of the news. We've had a number of other really important issues facing us as a nation, particularly around Indigenous truth and reconciliation, around Black Lives Matter. We've had to deal with this and try to incorporate what we're learning and what we're discovering into our day-to-day. And so some of these fundamental questions about energy have been a little bit put aside, but right now we're facing a bit of a energy crisis in terms of pricing. We're expecting prices to go up as we go through the winter, and that's always bad news. To fix this and to get us to this net zero future that the government of Canada is proposing, we do need a suite of technologies, and it's not just renewable electricity. I know that is the number one thing that people think of when they think of renewable energy. They think of solar panels, they think of wind turbines, maybe hydropower. These are clean or clean-ish technologies that can really help us make the transition. But in Canada, the other two things that we need, the really important breakthrough technologies, are going to be some kind of fuel to help us move around, whether this is hydrogen or whether this is some kind of renewable fuel. We're a big country and we rely heavily on trucks to move things, from place to place. And the other thing is heat. We're going to face a little bit of a reckoning when it comes to heat. If we truly want to get to net zero, we're not going to be able to use as much natural gas as we've used. We're not going to be able to use the fossil fuels to heat our homes or to cool our homes in the summer. We're going to have to look at other options, and that might be district heating, where we can, bring a lot of different buildings or institutions or homes together through a district heating network. It might be through renewable natural gas, which is a very different sort of an application. But we need all of those things to work. So we need the renewable electricity, and we need the renewable fuels for heating and the renewable fuels for transport to really make the transition.
Okay, so I see we have a lot of work to do still.
We do.
So there's been a lot of talk recently about small modular reactors, which have been seen as an example of a promising type of energy technology in the latter stages of development, with a demonstration plant in development. What role do you see small modular reactors playing in Canada's energy mix in the future?
So it's a wonderful question, and something that I think a lot of people are interested in. Small modular reactors, you can think of them as the next generation of nuclear reactor. You know, the old generations were monolithic, huge installations producing hundreds of megawatts of power, required big upfront investments, and I mean really big, billions of dollars of investment for every plant, and really came with a host of problems. You know, the biggest problem probably being the waste that is generated from these plants, and how do you manage it? We know how to manage it. You know, it's not a question of learning something new, but it's a very laborious and very, very strict protocols have to be followed in order to make sure that that nuclear waste doesn't cause other problems to us down the road. And it's a very long-term problem. Like, this problem doesn't go away. The waste just accumulates and we have to deal with it. Small modular reactors are, as I say, a next generation design. Some of them may be able to use some of the waste that we've generated from the old reactors. So suddenly there's an opportunity to maybe get some energy out of that and convert high grade nuclear waste to lower grade nuclear waste. So processing it further. They're smaller, as the name implies, and modular, which should both drive down costs in terms of how much it costs to install these things. And nuclear power is a really important component of the electrical mix, because nuclear power is a base load. It doesn't vary too much, you know, from day to day. It's hard to turn a nuclear reactor on and off. So once they're on, they're on. We can use that electricity, and it's quite cheap electricity when you amortize it out over the lifetime of the plants. Lots of money up front, but relatively cheap over time. Small modular reactors could really help fill a niche in our electrical mix, particularly as the old reactors start to go offline. And we have currently 4 reactor sites in Canada that are operational and providing power to the population. Those are 4 sites where we could see small modular reactors deployed within the next, you know, decade or 2. It will never be the entire energy mix. Like, we're never going to run our entire country off of nuclear power, but it will remain, I think, an important component. And it's a really important tool in this battle towards net zero to bring our emissions down.
Okay, and switching to a different topic in the energy sphere, pipeline projects exporting oil from Canada to the United States have also been fraught with lots of controversy and political tension. What role do you see them playing in Canada's energy future?
It's an important question because it addresses, you know, the one thing that does usually hit the papers around our energy system, which is, what is the future of oil and gas? And, you know, how do we transition our country maybe away from quite as much oil and gas in the mix? When I'm teaching this to my classes, I try to get them to think about what the root problem is and then what the solutions could look like. So the root problem with oil and gas is that this is carbon that has been locked up for, you know, millions of years, many millions of years. And we're essentially burning it and releasing it back out into the atmosphere without any good mechanisms to soak it up again. And so that carbon is out doing things, you know, to our atmosphere, to our oceans, to our biosphere, to the plants and things that are out there, not all of which are good. You know, and climate change scientists have pretty much established that, you know, if we continue to emit, that we're going to continue to have the kind of climate change and the kind of knockoff implications that nobody wants. So we need to stop that combustion of fossil fuels. That's very clear, or we need to control those emissions in such a way that they're not going out into the atmosphere. It will take time to transition to a totally clean economy. It can't be done overnight. We've seen the implications of shutting down pipelines or having pipeline disruptions. For instance, everybody I think has been following the oil spill off the coast of California, off Long Beach. That was caused by an anchor strike on a pipe that was lying on the bottom of the ocean. It was a very small hole in the pipe, but it led to hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil being spilled. But what it's really done is it's exacerbated the supply disruptions that we're seeing in the oil sector. So, you know, we're seeing gaps in supply, and that's leading to higher and higher prices. And there's lots of other examples in the world right now where gaps in supply are causing problems. So as we're transitioning away from using fossil fuels for energy, we still need the pipelines to work. You know, we still need them to deliver energy into the system so that we're not experiencing big disruptions that are going to cause probably bigger problems than just dealing with the oil and gas itself. But we need to have a plan for what happens at the end, you know, when we stop needing oil and gas for energy. And there's a couple things that it could be. You know, one is that the pipelines ultimately are shut down and we don't use them anymore, and they just go out of existence somewhere in the next 20 or 30 years as we aim towards 2050. The other is that we figure out other applications for oil and gas, other things that we could be doing with that fossil product or fossil resource that doesn't involve emissions. And you can think of some of the refinery products that are out there, like plastics or more durable products that we're probably still going to want. So some pipelines we may still need, you know, in the long term. Right now, I think one of the big issues that we have is that nobody wants to seriously start looking at what the transition will look like, what it will entail when we're finished. So nobody wants to say, well, this pipeline project may not make any sense. This pipeline project, on the other hand, may be a useful project that we need on an ongoing basis. And that's something that our lab is starting to get into, because the transition can't just be an overnight transition. It can't just be something that will wake up tomorrow and it will be all renewable energy and everything will be fine. This kind of transition is going to take us decades, and we need to work with the system that we have, and we need to make the changes necessary in order to get to where we want to go.
Thank you for that answer. I see we have a lot of work to do
Yes.
to get there, and I'm glad that your lab is providing guidance on how to get there. So CSPC is very thankful for the support of Queen's University and for your support as an active member of the CSPC community. What do you see as the biggest benefit and value for attending CSPC and supporting it?
So you've probably guessed, because of my background and the way that I work, I think that it's really important for science and policy to interface. I think that there needs to be places, fora, where that can happen, where scientists and policymakers can rub shoulders and talk to each other in language that's accessible. Because often we get lost in our jargon in our own worlds. And if you've ever tried to wade through a physics paper on a nuclear plant, or to understand the chemistry behind some biochemical reactions to make new fuels, it's very easy to get lost in the science. It's also very easy to get lost in the policy and all of the checks and balances that that system entails. CSPC is a place for, you know, and I think that that's really important. It is the premier conference in Canada to do that. And so I've always been a big supporter myself. I'm glad that my institution does it, because as the director of the School of Policy Studies, one of the things that I want to see is more interaction between the amazing scientists, and I'm talking about physical, social, humanities, creative artists, like all of the scientists that we have on our campus. I want them to interact more with that policy world. I want them to feel comfortable when they start talking to people that are actually trying to evolve new policies or develop policies that can answer specific concerns. CSPC is a great place to kind of, dip your feet into that and experience a bit of that and hear from a chief scientist or hear from a minister, hear from, prize-winning scientists who have made breakthroughs in their areas, and then to find common ground where you can talk about those issues and put them together.
Thank you for that very thoughtful answer. And we're very happy to have your support and your institution's support. And we look forward to future interactions with you at the conference and in future years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be part of this. And on behalf of all of my colleagues here at Queen's, we're delighted to be part and to provide this support. It's a great event. Perfect. No, I just wanted to ask, I tried to keep the answers sort of bite-sized, so I was watching the clock, not to run over about 4 minutes or 5 minutes, because I know that gets really long to listen to. So hopefully they made sense. I was kind of going off the cuff, and do feel free, to edit these things around, because I know you will, but I know that you can probably make it even more coherent than maybe I was.
Yeah, Warren, the answers were very good.
Oh, well, good. And thanks so much for the opportunity to do this. And I know you're accommodating.
Hello, because